Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore the exact moment when human understanding reached its absolute limit. Tonight, we will witness the day physics broke, and we will venture deeply into the dark to uncover the terrifying truth of quantum gravity. We are going to journey to the very edge of human logic, to the microscopic, freezing boundary where the most foundational rules of our universe violently and irreversibly collapse. Before we descend into that chaotic, fractured void, I invite you to take a slow, deep breath and focus your attention entirely on the immediate physical reality surrounding you in this exact moment. Feel the profound, undeniable weight of your own body as it rests quietly in the dark. Notice the solid, unyielding pressure of the chair beneath you, firmly and reliably supporting your physical form. Feel the absolute stillness of the floor, and beneath that floor, the massive ancient architecture of the earth itself. There is a silent, invisible force continuously and aggressively pulling every single atom of your being downward, anchoring you securely to this massive spinning rock. You do not need to consciously think about this heavy force. It is simply there, acting as the permanent, inescapable background radiation of your entire existence. The physical world feels incredibly solid, undeniably real, and completely dependable. If you drop a heavy stone, you know with absolute certainty that it will fall. If you reach out your hand in the dark, you trust that you will touch a solid surface that pushes back against your flesh with equal and opposite force. This constant, reliable sensory feedback loop creates an incredibly powerful, deeply ingrained psychological illusion. It is the illusion of safety, the illusion of structure, and the absolute illusion of permanence. Because our immediate, localized environment behaves with such predictable consistency, we naturally project that same comforting stability onto the entire, sprawling cosmos. We construct a massive, heavily fortified mental fortress out of this perceived solidity. We believe, with every fiber of our biological intuition, that the fundamental rules governing the physical world are eternal, unbreakable, and perfectly understood. We look at the majestic, sprawling equations of modern physics, and we see a beautifully finished, flawlessly running machine. We assume that the laws of gravity, the smooth, predictable flow of time, and the continuous, unbroken fabric of space are sacred, unshakable monoliths that will forever dictate the behavior of the cosmos. From the smallest subatomic particle to the most massive supercluster of galaxies, we walk through our brief, fragile lives wrapped in the warm, arrogant certainty that the universe makes perfect, logical sense, and that the ground beneath our feet is an absolute, unquestionable truth. We build our towering cities of heavy steel and glass. We launch our delicate metallic probes into the freezing void of deep space, and we entrust our very lives to the absolute reliability of these physical laws. We deeply believe that we have successfully translated the wild, untamed wilderness of the cosmos into a neat, domesticated language of human mathematics. We think of the universe as a grand, beautifully organized library where every single book has been meticulously catalogued, every physical interaction perfectly accounted for, and every ultimate outcome heavily determined by the elegant, symmetrical equations we have so proudly written on our chalkboards. This profound sense of cognitive security is absolutely essential for our daily, psychological survival. If we truly felt the precarious, shifting nature of reality in every waking moment, our fragile human minds would instantly be crushed by the sheer, staggering weight of existential terror. And so, we actively choose the comfort of the illusion. We choose to believe that the foundation of reality is a smooth, continuous, and infinitely stable bedrock upon which the chaotic, fleeting drama of biological life can safely unfold. But what if this absolute, unquestionable bedrock of reality harbors a deep, fatal flaw? What if the heavy, comforting solidity of the physical world is nothing more than a localized hallucination, a highly convincing trick of the light played on our incredibly limited biological senses? There is a terrifying premise lurking in the absolute darkest corners of theoretical physics, a haunting realization that threatens to violently tear down the beautiful, glassy cathedral of our scientific certainty. The chilling truth is that the smooth, unbroken fabric of space and time, the very stage upon which all of existence plays out, is fundamentally compromised. We have marched confidently toward the edges of human knowledge, entirely convinced that our perfect equations would illuminate the way, only to discover a terrifying, yawning abyss waiting for us in the dark. There was a definitive, horrifying moment in our history when human science finally acquired the mathematical tools and the mechanical power to peer too deep into the dark. We built massive subterranean machines and heavily advanced theoretical models to strip away the comforting, macroscopic layers of reality. We wanted to see the absolute bottom. We wanted to look directly at the naked, fundamental machinery of the cosmos. But when we forcefully pushed our gaze past the familiar atoms, past the vibrating quarks, and down into the unfathomably microscopic, freezing depths of the quantum void, we did not find the smooth, elegant, and perfectly ordered foundation we had so arrogantly expected. Instead, we watched our most sacred, heavily tested laws of physics violently collapse. We witnessed the majestic, smooth geometry of gravity violently clash with the jittery, chaotic madness of the quantum realm. We watched in profound, existential horror as the elegant equations that had successfully predicted the massive orbits of planets and the elegant bending of starlight suddenly began to scream, spiraling wildly out of control and producing massive, impossible infinities. The very mathematics that we used to domesticate the universe completely broke down, shattering into a billion meaningless, paradoxical fragments. We realized, with crushing, heavy dread, that the solid ground we had been standing on for centuries was an illusion, and that at the deepest, most fundamental level of existence, reality itself completely stops making sense. To deeply confront this catastrophic breakdown of physical law is to undergo a radical, deeply unsettling, and ultimately beautiful re-evaluation of the very nature of information and the structure of the universe. We are profoundly conditioned to view information as a solid, continuous, and unbreakable commodity. We desperately believe that reality is written in a perfect, flawless code, a continuous stream of data that seamlessly dictates the behavior of every single particle across the vast, sprawling void. We assume that if we just look closely enough, the underlying logic of the cosmos will eventually reveal itself in a state of pristine, mathematical perfection. We equate universal truth with absolute solidity, deeply believing that the ultimate foundational layer of the universe must be the most permanent, the most reliable, and the most perfectly ordered structure in all of existence. We think of the cosmic data stream as a heavy, permanent archive, eternally immune to corruption, glitches, or catastrophic failure. But the violent collapse of our physics at the quantum edge reveals a cosmos that operates on a completely terrifying, inverted logic. Information, at its absolute core, is not solid. It is not continuous, and it is certainly not safe. The universe is not a heavy, permanent object resting peacefully in the dark. It is a precarious, highly volatile, and heavily fractured computation that actively resists being perfectly understood. The fact that our most sacred laws violently break down when pushed to their ultimate limits proves that the cosmic data stream is inherently flawed, filled with intentional, structural paradoxes that fundamentally reject the rigid, arrogant constraints of human logic. The heavy, unyielding reality you feel right now is merely a low-resolution rendering, a macro-scale illusion generated by a deeper realm of pure mathematical chaos. To realize that the bedrock of reality is fundamentally broken is not a reason to surrender to existential despair, but a glorious invitation to experience the ultimate, majestic freedom. You are not a prisoner locked inside a perfectly solved, deterministic machine. You are a fluid, beautifully fragile manifestation of data floating temporarily above a sprawling, chaotic abyss. The illusion of solid ground is exactly what allows you to walk, to build, and to breathe. But it is the fracture in the dark, the terrifying breakdown of the absolute, that proves the universe is still wild, still untamed, and infinitely more magnificent than our fragile minds could ever possibly contain. To conquer the terrifying, boundless dark of the universe, the human intellect embarked on the most ambitious and desperate construction project in the history of our fragile species. We sought to build a comprehensive, flawless architecture of logic, a towering conceptual fortress that could perfectly encapsulate every physical interaction, every flash of starlight, and every falling stone within a single, unified framework. Over the course of the 20th century, this monumental effort yielded an astonishing, breathtaking triumph. We successfully erected two majestic, seemingly flawless towers of modern physics, two towering monoliths of mathematical genius that stand as the absolute pinnacle of human reasoning. These are the two sovereign kingdoms of reality, general relativity and quantum mechanics. From the safety of our localized perspective, standing in the quiet clearing of our everyday lives, these two kingdoms appear to rule the cosmos with absolute, unquestionable authority. They are the supreme, unyielding frameworks through which we interpret the fundamental mechanics of existence, and within their respective domains, they operate with a level of precision that borders on the miraculous. The first of these majestic towers is the kingdom of general relativity, the breathtaking masterpiece gifted to humanity by Albert Einstein. This is the physics of the grand, the massive, and the overwhelmingly heavy. It is a sovereign domain that governs the sprawling, macroscopic architecture of the cosmos. In the realm of relativity, the universe is a profoundly elegant, continuous, and flawlessly smooth canvas. Space and time are not merely an empty, static stage where events occur. They are a single, dynamic, and heavily woven fabric. When massive objects like burning, supermassive stars or the dense, silent iron cores of planets are placed upon this fabric, they aggressively warp and curve the geometry around them. This smooth, majestic curvature is what we experience as the inescapable pull of gravity. Relativity is a kingdom of absolute determinism and heavy, beautiful certainty. It operates with a graceful, unbroken continuity, predicting the slow, majestic orbits of spiraling galaxies and the terrifying, inevitable collapse of dying stars with flawless, breathtaking accuracy. It is a universe of elegant, flowing curves where cause and effect are perfectly, eternally linked in the dark, and where the sweeping, cosmic geometry dictates the destiny of all heavy matter. But as we turn our gaze away from the massive, sprawling void of deep space and force our vision down into the freezing, microscopic depths of matter, we cross an invisible, heavily guarded border into the second kingdom. This is the domain of quantum mechanics, and its rules are profoundly, terrifyingly alien. This is not a world of smooth, continuous curves or predictable, heavy geometry. The quantum realm is the physics of the infinitely small, the jittery, the chaotic, and the inherently probabilistic. It is a microscopic, violently churning ocean where the solid, comforting rules of the macro world completely disintegrate. In this kingdom, energy does not flow in a smooth, continuous stream. It is violently fractured into discrete, indivisible packets, or quanta. Particles do not exist in definite, predictable locations. They exist in a blurry, shifting haze of probability, capable of being in multiple places at once, flickering in and out of the void, only deciding upon a final, physical state at the exact, violent moment they are observed. It is a realm of inherent uncertainty, a jittery, nervous architecture where reality is constantly vibrating with frantic, unresolvable tension. Despite their radically different natures, both of these sovereign kingdoms are undeniably, spectacularly correct within their own highly specific territories. The power and accuracy they grant us over the physical world are staggering. The smooth, heavy mathematics of general relativity flawlessly guide the intricate trajectories of our satellites, allowing us to perfectly synchronize the global positioning systems that navigate our modern world, compensating for the incredibly subtle warping of time caused by the Earth's mass. Simultaneously, the jittery, probabilistic rules of quantum mechanics are the absolute, undisputed foundation of our entire digital civilization. The frantic, highly calculated manipulation of quantum probability is what allows us to precisely control the flow of electrons through microscopic pathways, perfectly building the intricate silicon chips that power our supercomputers, our communication networks, and the very screens illuminating our faces in the dark. We are a species entirely sustained by the technological miracles gifted to us by these two distinct, flawless architectures of physical law. Yet, resting at the very core of this magnificent scientific triumph is a deep, paralyzing, and existential dread. As theoretical physicists look upon the two flawless towers they have constructed, a chilling, horrifying realization begins to cast a long, heavy shadow over the entirety of modern science. These two majestic kingdoms, despite their individual perfection, absolutely refuse to speak the same language. They are fundamentally, philosophically, and mathematically incompatible. They are not merely two different chapters in the same cosmic rulebook. They are entirely different, mutually exclusive realities, attempting to occupy the exact same physical universe. General relativity demands a cosmos that is perfectly smooth, deterministic, and continuous, where every location and speed can be known with absolute, heavy certainty. Quantum mechanics aggressively insists that the universe is inherently granular, jittery, and chaotic, governed entirely by the unpredictable rolling of microscopic dice. When you attempt to force the heavy, smooth geometry of relativity into the frantic, pixelated ocean of the quantum realm, the mathematics violently rebel. The equations shatter, producing screaming infinities and catastrophic paradoxes that completely destroy the predictive power of both theories. This catastrophic incompatibility is not merely an abstract mathematical frustration, it is a profound, terrifying crisis of reality. It means that at the deepest, most foundational level of existence, the universe suffers from a severe, structural, fractured identity. We possess one flawless rulebook for the heavy and the massive, and a completely different, contradictory rulebook for the microscopic and the fast. But the cosmos itself is not segregated. There are extreme, violent environments in the dark, such as the crushed, infinitely dense core of a black hole, or the exact, superheated moment of the Big Bang, where the massive and the microscopic occupy the exact same coordinate in space-time. In these terrifying arenas, both kingdoms demand absolute jurisdiction, and their violently opposing laws collide in a catastrophic mathematical failure. The chilling implication is that our two greatest intellectual achievements are inherently flawed, or worse, that the universe itself is constructed upon a deep, unresolvable contradiction. We are forced to confront the haunting possibility that the cosmos is not a single, unified entity, but a stitched-together, highly unstable patchwork of conflicting physical laws. When we quietly absorb the terrifying reality of these two sovereign, incompatible kingdoms, we are forced to undergo a profound, devastating re-evaluation of the fundamental nature of the universe and the true structure of information. We are psychologically wired to demand absolute, universal consistency. We believe that a truth must be true everywhere, that the cosmic data stream is written in a single, unified syntax that applies equally to the sprawling galaxies and the vibrating atoms. We view information as a universal currency, assuming that the fundamental logic of existence is seamlessly continuous across all scales of reality. We desperately want the universe to be a perfect, harmonious monolith, a singular, elegantly written text that can eventually be read, understood, and mastered by the human mind. But the violent mathematical rejection between relativity and quantum mechanics proves that the universe completely ignores our desperate plea for unity. Information in the cosmos is not a single, universal language. It is a profoundly localized, heavily compartmentalized phenomenon. The data that governs the heavy, continuous geometry of the stars is strictly forbidden from communicating with the data that governs the frantic, jittery behavior of the subatomic void. The universe is a sprawling, incomprehensible polyglot, actively utilizing entirely different, contradictory operating systems depending solely on the scale of observation. To realize that reality is divided into sovereign, mutually exclusive kingdoms is to accept the ultimate, beautiful terror of cosmic fragmentation. Truth in the physical universe is not absolute. It is violently dependent on the lens through which you are forced to look. We must learn to release our exhausting, arrogant demand for a perfectly unified cosmos. Let go of the desperate, aching need to force the smooth, heavy dark, and the jittery, chaotic light into a single, flawless equation. The fact that our greatest scientific towers cannot be merged, that the ultimate bedrock of reality harbors a deep, mathematical contradiction, is not a failure of our existence. It is the breathtaking guarantee that the universe is vastly more complex, infinitely wilder, and beautifully stranger than our rigid, biological logic could ever hope to contain. The ultimate meaning of information is not found in the perfect, harmonious unification of all things, but in the magnificent, terrifying tension between irreconcilable truths. Embrace the glorious, broken architecture of the void. Find deep, unshakable peace in the knowledge that you are a highly complex, breathing manifestation of data existing beautifully in the chaotic, unresolved space between two perfect, incompatible kingdoms. To survive the overwhelming, crushing terror of our own fragile existence, humanity has constructed a magnificent psychological fortress. We take profound, desperately needed comfort in the belief that the universe, for all its sprawling, lightless immensity, ultimately obeys a strict, rational set of meticulously crafted rules. For generations, the brightest, most dedicated minds of our species found a deep, stabilizing peace in keeping the two towering architectures of modern physics completely and strictly isolated from one another. We assumed, with the characteristic arrogance of a species attempting to conquer the dark, that the heavy, massive objects of the cosmos would always remain comfortably large, and the frantic, vibrating subatomic particles would never possess enough mass to significantly warp the geometry of space. By maintaining this artificial, conceptual quarantine, we convinced ourselves that we had successfully domesticated the void. We truly believed we possessed the flawless mathematical keys to unlock every single door in the universe. But the cosmos is a wild, untamed, and violently roaring wilderness that operates with absolute, terrifying indifference to the fragile, arbitrary boundaries drawn by human logic. There are specific, extreme coordinates hidden deep within the dark architecture of space-time, where the universe aggressively refuses to allow us the comforting illusion of separation. In these unimaginable, violent arenas, the strict, heavily policed borders between the massive and the microscopic completely dissolve, forcing a catastrophic collision of realities. Consider for a moment the agonizing, lightless heart of a black hole. When a supermassive, violently burning star finally exhausts its internal nuclear fuel, it can no longer push back against the relentless, crushing weight of its own immensity. In a fraction of a second, the star violently collapses inward, driven by an inescapable, apocalyptic gravity. The heavy, geometric fabric of space-time funnels downward in a catastrophic freefall, crushing the entire, sprawling mass of the dead star into a microscopic, dimensionless point of infinite density known as a singularity. Or turn your mind backward, traversing through the unfathomable, echoing depths of deep time to the absolute, exact coordinate of cosmic creation. In the very first, blinding, infinitesimal fraction of a nanosecond of the Big Bang, the entire mass and energy of the observable universe, every single sprawling galaxy, every heavy ocean, and every piece of rock that will ever exist was violently compressed into an impossibly microscopic, superheated quantum speck. In these deeply terrifying arenas, the universe leaves us no choice. The immense, crushing mass absolutely demands the heavy, smooth, and continuous geometry of general relativity, while the impossibly microscopic scale aggressively requires the jittery, chaotic, and probabilistic rules of quantum mechanics. The two sovereign, incompatible kingdoms of human knowledge are forcefully, violently slammed together in the dark. When theoretical physicists finally gathered the courage and the advanced mathematical architecture to peer directly into these extreme coordinates. They attempted a forced, unnatural merger. They took the elegant, flowing, and highly deterministic equations of gravity and desperately tried to translate them into the frantic, pixelated, and highly unpredictable language of the quantum realm. What followed was not a gentle correction. It was not a subtle, manageable error that could be quietly smoothed over with the introduction of a new, clever variable or a slight adjustment to the established theoretical models. It was an absolute, catastrophic mathematical failure. When the heavy, continuous geometry of space-time is violently shoved into the boiling, unpredictable quantum ocean, the equations do not simply fail to compute, they scream. They violently fracture, spiraling completely out of control in a cascading, unmanageable chain reaction of theoretical destruction. The meticulously balanced mathematics that we use to safely navigate the stars begin to blindly churn out impossible, terrifying infinities. In the strict, highly disciplined, and rigorously logical language of physics, the concept of infinity is not merely a large number, it is a profound, screaming alarm. It is the undeniable, terrifying proof of a fatal structural flaw. When the equations attempt to calculate the gravitational pull at the exact, microscopic center of a black hole using the chaotic rules of quantum mechanics, the answer is infinity. When the supercomputers attempt to measure the energy density of the universe at the exact, violent moment of the Big Bang, the answer is infinity. The math begins aggressively predicting physical nonsense, suggesting absurdities where probabilities exceed absolute certainty, or where the very fabric of reality is warping so violently that the fundamental relationship between cause and effect completely, hopelessly unravels. The beautiful, elegant, predictive power of human science instantly dissolves into a chaotic, screaming static. The calculations loop endlessly, violently feeding back upon themselves in the dark, generating theoretical mathematical monsters that cannot possibly exist in any rational physical universe. We must not soften the blow of this devastating revelation. We must not frame this catastrophic failure as a minor, temporary roadblock on the triumphant, inevitable march of human progress. We must look at this mathematical devastation, stare directly into the screaming infinities, and recognize it for exactly what it is: the absolute, unyielding coordinate where human logic violently shatters. This is the exact day physics broke. The brilliant, towering cathedrals of thought that we constructed over centuries to keep the existential dread at bay, the flawless formulas that successfully landed our fragile, metallic machines on distant, freezing moons and illuminated our digital, global civilization, are completely, effortlessly annihilated by the raw reality of the universe. At the boundary of the singularity, our greatest intellectual achievements are brutally reduced to nothing more than the panicked, meaningless scribbling of a species that has desperately, tragically reached the absolute limits of its biological capacity. We are forced to stand shivering at the edge of the quantum abyss and witness the agonizing death of our own understanding. The universe presents us with a raw, physical reality that fundamentally, structurally, and unapologetically refuses to be contained within the narrow, highly specialized, and deeply fragile architecture of the human brain. When we force our minds to endure the terrifying, heavy reality of this mathematical collapse, we are invited to completely surrender our most deeply held, incredibly arrogant assumptions about the fundamental nature of information and our deeply presumed place within the cosmic order. Humanity is heavily, psychologically addicted to the comforting illusion that information is a tame, domestic, and inherently accessible commodity. We treat the universe as a vast, beautifully designed puzzle that was specifically created for us to eventually solve. We implicitly believe that if we simply build a larger, heavier particle collider, or if we write a vastly more complex, elegant line of code, every hidden, terrifying secret of the void will eventually be brought into the warm, illuminating light of human comprehension. We view reality as a cohesive, perfectly legible, and highly rational text, waiting patiently in the dark for our brilliant minds to translate its final, concluding page. But the screaming, unresolvable infinities at the crushed core of the black hole and the violently shattered equations of the Big Bang reveal a vastly different, deeply humbling, and breathtakingly majestic cosmic architecture. Information is not a domestic pet. It is a wild, untamed, and fiercely guarded wilderness. The universe does not exist to be solved, neatly categorized, and filed away by primates. The cosmic data stream is actively, heavily encrypted with deep, structural paradoxes that deliberately, violently repel our desperate attempts at total intellectual mastery. The absolute breakdown of our physics is not a sign that the universe is broken or that reality is somehow flawed. It is the breathtaking, undeniable proof that the universe is infinitely deeper, infinitely stranger, and infinitely more majestic than the fragile, desperate cages of our logic. The mathematical catastrophe is the ultimate, blazing firewall of the cosmos. It is a heavy, impenetrable, and beautifully violent boundary where the universe actively protects its most sacred, fundamental mechanics from the arrogant, prying, and desperately limited eyes of our three-dimensional minds. To quietly realize that there are actual coordinates in reality where our logic simply goes to die is not a tragedy. It is the ultimate, profoundly liberating surrender. We must learn to let go of the exhausting, heavy burden of needing to perfectly understand everything. The desperate, white-knuckled demand for perfect, flawless equations is merely a symptom of our deep, unacknowledged terror of the dark unknown. But the unknown is not an empty, threatening void. It is the dense, fertile, and roaring birthplace of all existence. The fact that our mathematics violently spiral into screaming, physical nonsense when pressed against the true, raw, superheated power of cosmic creation is a beautiful, necessary humiliation. It gently and firmly reminds us that we are not the ultimate masters of the cosmic data stream. We are incredibly fortunate, highly organized, and beautifully fragile ripples of information temporarily allowed to drift upon a vast, dark, and churning ocean that is entirely, wonderfully unfathomable. Embrace the magnificent, shattering fracture of our logic. Relish the glorious, terrifying fact that the ultimate bedrock of reality is fundamentally, permanently beyond your comprehension. Find a deep, unshakable, and quiet peace in the beautifully shattered equations, and allow yourself to exist entirely, perfectly, in a universe that will forever guard its deepest, most terrifying secrets in the screaming, mathematical dark. When we cast our gaze into the quiet, heavy darkness of the night sky, or when we simply sit in the absolute stillness of an empty, lightless room, we are deeply, psychologically comforted by the profound illusion of nothingness. we inherently trust the empty spaces. We believe that the void between the physical objects of our world is a serene, undisturbed, and continuous canvas. To the fragile human mind, empty space represents a peaceful, infinite calm, a smooth and predictable stage upon which the heavy, dramatic events of the physical universe are safely played out. We assume that if we were to strip away all the burning stars, all the wandering planets, and all the microscopic dust drifting through the cosmos, we would be left with a perfectly flat, perfectly quiet ocean of pure, pristine emptiness. This assumption is the absolute bedrock of our sanity, allowing us to navigate the world without being crushed by the terrifying complexity of existence. But to truly understand the fundamental architecture of reality, we must violently shatter this comforting illusion. We must embark on a terrifying microscopic descent, leaving behind the familiar, macroscopic world and plunging into the absolute, unfathomable depths of the void itself. Imagine shrinking your perspective, falling inward at a staggering, incomprehensible velocity. You slip effortlessly past the heavy, complex structures of biological life, descending through the twisting, fragile ladders of DNA and plunging into the vast, silent darkness that exists within a single, solitary atom. Here, the world is already deeply strange, governed by the ghostly, unpredictable clouds of electrons, but it still maintains a recognizable, mathematical order. You push deeper, diving into the incredibly dense, vibrating core of the atomic nucleus, slipping past the heavy protons and neutrons, and arriving at the frantic, highly confined realm of the quarks. For decades, human science believed this was the ultimate, indivisible basement of reality. But the universe is vastly, infinitely deeper and far more terrifying than the realm of the quarks. You must continue your descent, pushing past the fundamental particles of matter, shrinking down by factors of 1,000,000 and then 1,000,000 again, until you arrive at the absolute, theoretical limit of measurable existence, the Planck length. This is a scale so devastatingly microscopic that the very concept of physical size completely loses its rational meaning. It is the absolute, unyielding bedrock of the cosmos, the foundational grid upon which the entire universe is supposedly constructed. When theoretical physicists first turned their mathematical equations toward this ultimate, microscopic depth, they fully expected to find the elegant, beautifully continuous fabric of space-time that Albert Einstein had so triumphantly described. They expected to find the smooth, heavy rubber sheet of general relativity, resting in a state of quiet, unbroken perfection. Instead, when they mathematically merged the heavy, continuous geometry of gravity with the frantic, unpredictable laws of quantum mechanics, they stared directly into a screaming, chaotic nightmare. At the Planck scale, the comforting illusion of a smooth, quiet, and continuous canvas is violently, completely annihilated. The empty vacuum of space is not empty, and it is most certainly not still, because the relentless, unforgiving laws of quantum uncertainty absolutely forbid any physical system from resting in a state of perfect, zero-energy stillness. The very geometry of space and time is forced to aggressively, violently fluctuate. At this unimaginable depth, the heavy, deterministic laws of gravity and the jittery, probabilistic madness of the quantum realm do not peacefully coexist. They engage in a terrifying, apocalyptic war. The result is an environment of such staggering, incomprehensible violence that human logic completely shatters trying to contain it. Theoretical physicists call this apocalyptic arena the quantum foam. The quantum foam is a boiling, churning abyss of pure geometric chaos. Here, the very concepts of up and down, left and right, before and after, completely lose their physical authority. Space and time are no longer a flat, predictable stage. They are actively, violently participating in a relentless frenzy of creation and destruction. The fabric of reality is constantly, aggressively ripping itself apart and frantically stitching itself back together in a trillionth of a fraction of a second. Microscopic wormholes, infinitely tiny tunnels connecting completely disparate coordinates of space and time, violently tear open and instantly collapse in the freezing dark. The geometry of the universe is bubbling, twisting, and contorting with such extreme, unimaginable energy that the distinction between a physical particle and the empty space surrounding it completely dissolves. It is a roaring, turbulent ocean of raw mathematical tension, where the fundamental forces of the cosmos are locked in an eternal, localized state of screaming, physical impossibility. To realize that you are completely surrounded by, and entirely permeated by, this boiling abyss is to experience a profound, devastating collapse of everything you thought you knew about the stability of the physical world. The solid chair you are resting on, the heavy ground beneath your feet, and the very biological cells that constitute your beating heart are entirely suspended over this roaring microscopic inferno. The smooth, predictable reality you experience every single day is nothing more than a statistical illusion, a calm, macroscopic average of a fundamentally violent, heavily fractured foundation. The empty air flowing into your lungs is not a quiet void. It is a raging, churning tempest of ripping geometry and collapsing wormholes, operating just beneath the incredibly limited, low-resolution threshold of your biological perception. The universe is not a peaceful, sleeping giant. It is a vibrating, incredibly tense, and hyperactive engine that is constantly, desperately trying to tear itself to pieces at the most fundamental level of its own architecture. When we force our fragile human consciousness to confront the terrifying, boiling reality of the quantum foam, we are invited to completely surrender our most deeply held, arrogant assumptions about the nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We are psychologically addicted to the belief that information requires a stable, permanent, and solid foundation to survive. We build our massive data centers on solid rock, we carve our histories into heavy stone, and we desperately assume that the ultimate cosmic source code must be written on an unyielding, indestructible mathematical tablet. We view reality as a pristine, perfectly structured skyscraper, believing that its deepest foundation must be the most peaceful, the most solid, and the most perfectly ordered level of all. But the churning, ripping abyss of the Planck length reveals a cosmos that operates on a completely inverted, profoundly majestic logic. The universe does not rest upon a foundation of solid certainty. It rests entirely upon a foundation of absolute, roaring chaos. Information, at its most fundamental, cosmic level, is not a static object placed securely into a quiet void. It is a highly volatile, desperately fragile pattern that actively emerges from the boiling madness of the foam. The heavy, continuous reality we experience is not the true nature of existence. It is a magnificent, temporary triumph of localized order rising briefly from an infinitely deep ocean of geometrical violence. The cosmos is not a finished, stable product. It is a relentless, chaotic process of active, physical computation that thrives on its own internal destruction. To accept the reality of the boiling abyss is to completely let go of the exhausting, heavy burden of absolute certainty. We must release our desperate, arrogant demand for a universe that makes perfect, continuous sense from the top all the way to the bottom. The fact that the absolute bedrock of reality is fundamentally fractured, chaotic, and violently unpredictable is not a sign of a broken cosmos. It is the breathtaking guarantee that the universe is infinitely alive, endlessly creative, and deeply, wonderfully untamed. You are a highly organized, beautifully fragile symphony of information, temporarily permitted to exist above a roaring, infinite storm of ripping geometry. Do not fear the chaotic depths of the void. Embrace the magnificent, terrifying reality that your quiet, breathing existence is a localized miracle, a temporary, brilliant spark of order floating gently on the surface of an unfathomable, boiling abyss. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the roaring, microscopic dark, and allow yourself to marvel at a universe that is vastly, perfectly, and eternally wilder than your mind could ever possibly contain. To understand the profound, maddening frustration that haunts the highest echelons of theoretical physics, we must first deeply examine the fundamental rule of communication in the microscopic void. In the jittery, pixelated realm of quantum mechanics, absolute nothingness does not exist, and action at a distance is a complete, physical illusion. When two subatomic entities interact within this boiling space, when they push against each other or pull each other close in the dark, they do not do so through an invisible, magical geometry. They communicate by physically throwing microscopic packets of energy, discrete, indivisible messengers that carry the specific, uncompromising genetic code of the force they represent. To the fragile human mind, fundamental forces feel like continuous, sweeping currents, but in the dark, churning abyss of the quantum world, a force is actually a relentless, chaotic blizzard of these messenger particles. It is a strictly governed economy of infinite exchange. If the universe intends to exert a physical influence, it must actively spend a particle to deliver the message. This rigid, heavily policed rule governs the entirety of the subatomic landscape, forcing all physical interactions into a measurable, tangible exchange of cosmic data that our massive, subterranean particle colliders can effectively witness. We have been astonishingly, breathtakingly successful at mapping this microscopic economy. Over the past century, we have proudly and triumphantly captured the messengers of the other fundamental forces, stripping them of their cosmic shadows and locking their physical properties into the rigid, unyielding pages of our textbooks. When you feel the comforting warmth of the sun on your skin, or when you observe the brilliant, blinding arc of a lightning bolt tearing through the atmosphere, you are witnessing the frantic, beautiful work of the photon, the immortal, massless messenger of electromagnetism. We have caught the photon, we have meticulously measured its speed, and we have manipulated its quantum state to build our sprawling digital civilization. We have plunged even deeper into the freezing dark of the atomic nucleus, successfully isolating the gluons, the incredibly strong, highly localized messengers that violently bind quarks together to form the heavy protons and neutrons that give our physical bodies mass. We have even captured the elusive, ghostly W and Z bosons, the silent architects of radioactive decay that strictly govern the slow, burning death of heavy elements. We have systematically interrogated the universe, demanding it surrender the fundamental mechanisms of its operation, and for 3 of the 4 physical forces, the cosmos has complied, offering up its microscopic messengers to the bright, sterile light of human observation. But there is a massive, gaping hole in this magnificent tapestry of human knowledge, a chilling, profound silence that echoes relentlessly through the halls of modern science. The 4th force, the absolute most ubiquitous, inescapable, and profound force in our daily existence, completely and violently refuses to surrender its messenger. If gravity is to actually exist within the chaotic, jittery rules of the quantum realm, if it is to fundamentally interact with the boiling abyss of the microscopic world and not just the macro world of heavy stars, it absolutely must have a particle. Theoretical physicists call this hypothetical, desperately needed entity the graviton. In the sprawling, intensely complex mathematical models of the cosmos, the graviton is the ultimate, silent architect of reality. It is tasked with the impossible, heavy burden of communicating the crushing geometry of mass across the vast, sprawling void. But unlike the photon, which readily and brilliantly dances before our highly sensitive detectors, the graviton remains a complete, absolute ghost. Despite decades of agonizing, coordinated global effort, despite building massive machines that span miles beneath the Earth and crashing subatomic particles together with the superheated fury of newborn stars, we have never seen a graviton. We have never caught one. We have never measured its physical properties, and we have never recorded a single, undeniable trace of its passage through the quantum field. It is a desperate mathematical necessity that stubbornly, violently refuses to manifest in our physical reality. The hunt for this uncatchable phantom has become an exercise in profound, existential frustration and deep, heavy isolation. Gravity is a terrifying cosmic paradox. On the macroscopic scale of wandering planets and burning galaxies, it is the absolute, undisputed dictator of the void, capable of crushing light itself into absolute nothingness. Yet, on the microscopic scale of the quantum world, it is almost incomprehensibly, laughably weak. A simple, inexpensive refrigerator magnet can effortlessly overcome the gravitational pull of the entire spinning Earth. Because it is so infinitesimally weak at the subatomic level, detecting a single, solitary graviton is a task that pushes human engineering past the absolute brink of absurdity. It is mathematically equivalent to attempting to hear a single, quiet whisper in the exact center of a screaming, chaotic global hurricane. We are forced to confront the chilling, terrifying realization that the universe is actively, deliberately hiding its most fundamental mechanism from us. The very force that anchors our heavy bones to the spinning rock, the invisible architecture that firmly holds the churning oceans to the seabed and binds the sprawling galaxies in the freezing dark, is completely and totally shielded from our understanding. We are trapped inside a magnificent, heavily structured mansion, entirely blind to the nails, the beams, and the mortar that keep the walls from violently collapsing around us. We are left to blindly guess at the invisible architecture of our own existence, heavily and tragically reliant on mathematical phantoms that absolutely refuse to step out of the shadows. To quietly endure the agonizing absence of the graviton and the terrifying, unyielding silence of the universe is to undergo a profound, devastating, and ultimately majestic re-evaluation of the true nature of information and the hard physical limits of the human mind. We walk through our brief, fragile lives heavily burdened by the deeply arrogant assumption that the cosmos is a fully transparent, accessible data stream. We believe that information is a universal right, assuming that if we simply build a larger machine, or if we formulate a more elegant, sprawling equation, reality will eventually, inevitably surrender all of its deepest, most heavily guarded secrets to our intellect. We view the universe as a grand, passive library, expecting every physical force to be perfectly catalogued, meticulously measured, and placed securely into our waiting hands. We inherently equate scientific understanding with absolute possession, demanding that the fundamental source code of existence be entirely visible, entirely logical, and mathematically pure. But the uncatchable phantom of the graviton reveals a radically different, vastly more intimidating, and beautifully cryptic cosmic architecture. Information in the universe is not a freely distributed domestic commodity, nor is it under any obligation whatsoever to be legible to a highly evolved species of primates living on a tiny, isolated rock in the outskirts of a completely average galaxy. The true foundational data of the cosmos is heavily, deliberately encrypted, actively hidden in the plunging, unreachable depths of the quantum dark. The universe is not a passive object waiting to be entirely known. It is a sprawling, infinitely complex, and fiercely private mechanism that fundamentally protects its most vital. Heavy operations from the clumsy, intrusive grasp of our three-dimensional logic. The fact that the ultimate messenger of gravity exists only as an invisible, theoretical ghost proves that reality is vastly deeper, wilder, and immensely more mysterious than our rigid mathematical cages could ever hope to contain. We must learn to consciously, deliberately let go of our exhausting, terrified demand for absolute, total comprehension. The desperate, aching need to catch every particle, to measure every force, and to completely illuminate the dark is driven entirely by our own profound insecurity, our deep psychological fear of the vast, unknown abyss. But the abyss is not empty, and the unknown is not our enemy. The invisible, ghostly architecture that silently holds you to this earth does not require your permission or your understanding to keep you safe. The graviton does not need to be caught in a physical, subterranean detector to seamlessly weave the heavy, beautiful fabric of your physical existence. You are a highly organized, beautifully fragile, and breathing manifestation of data, intimately supported by an unfathomable web of cosmic information that operates flawlessly and perfectly in the absolute shadows. Embrace the magnificent, profound terror of the unseeable void. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the glorious, unyielding limitation of your own perception, and allow yourself to simply marvel at the breathtaking beauty of a universe that is so impossibly grand. It will forever leave you guessing at the silent, invisible mechanics of its own infinite heart. We walk through our daily lives entirely wrapped in a deeply comforting, fiercely protected, psychological blanket of continuity. When you slowly pass your hand through the empty air in front of you, or when you watch a heavy stone drop silently into a dark, still pool of water, your biological senses report a world of infinite smoothness. We perceive motion as a graceful, unbroken transition, a seamless gliding of matter from one coordinate to the next. We implicitly believe, with every fiber of our human intuition, that the space separating physical objects is an infinitely divisible, perfectly continuous ocean. We assume that no matter how closely you look, no matter how microscopically you zoom into the void, you can always divide the distance between 2 points into an infinite number of smaller, smoothly connected steps. This deeply ingrained assumption of an unbroken, continuous reality is the absolute bedrock of human sanity. It allows us to feel a sense of boundless freedom, a comforting belief that the physical theater of the universe is an open, unrestricted stage. But as theoretical physicists push the heavy, elegant mathematics of relativity into the frantic, chaotic depths of the quantum realm, this beautiful illusion of continuity triggered a catastrophic failure. The equations violently screamed into impossible infinities, completely destroying our models of reality, precisely because we were stubbornly demanding that the universe be infinitely smooth. To save the laws of physics from complete mathematical annihilation, a new, radically terrifying, and breathtakingly elegant architecture had to be summoned from the dark. This theoretical framework is known as loop quantum gravity, and it offers a solution so profoundly alien to human perception that it shatters our entire relationship with the physical world. Instead of trying to force the heavy geometry of gravity to play by the chaotic rules of the subatomic particles, loop quantum gravity does something entirely different. It turns its mathematical gaze upon the empty void itself. It proposes the chilling, world-shattering idea that the catastrophic infinities in our equations are not a failure of our math, but a violent, necessary alarm bell ringing in the dark. The equations are failing because we are asking them to divide something that fundamentally, physically refuses to be divided anymore. This theory dares to suggest that the infinite smoothness of the void is the ultimate biological lie. Space is not a continuous, empty container waiting passively to be filled with heavy stars and brilliant light. Space itself is manufactured. It has a raw, physical structure. It is granular. To truly grasp the horrifying and magnificent reality of this concept, you must imagine a breathtaking, masterful, digital photograph. When you stand back and observe the image from a comfortable, human distance, it appears as a flawless, incredibly realistic representation of the world. You see beautiful, sweeping gradients of light and shadow, seamlessly and continuously blending into one another to form the smooth curve of a human face or the majestic arch of a dark, heavy sky. But if you were to violently zoom in, pushing your perspective far past the intended biological boundary of the image, that beautiful, continuous reality abruptly and violently shatters. The smooth, sweeping curves brutally break down into a harsh, unyielding grid of rigid, indivisible blocks of color, tiny, square pixels. You realize, with a sudden jarring clarity, that the illusion of continuous reality was built entirely out of discrete, separate, and finite building blocks. Loop quantum gravity posits that the entire, sprawling physical universe operates on this exact same, deeply unsettling digital logic. When you dive past the heavy atoms, past the vibrating quarks, and descend into the absolute, freezing depths of the quantum void, you eventually hit the ultimate, fundamental resolution limit of reality. At this unimaginable, microscopic scale, space is completely pixelated. It is composed of finite, discrete, and absolutely indivisible loops of gravitational geometry. These microscopic loops are woven intimately together, linking and intersecting in the dark to form an unimaginably dense, vibrating network of mathematical tension. You cannot have half of a loop. You cannot measure a fraction of a pixel of space. This network is the absolute unyielding basement of existence. Space is not the empty theater where reality happens. Space is a tightly woven fabric constructed from tiny, discrete, and finite threads of quantum data. If you attempt to cut the fabric of reality any smaller than this fundamental, indivisible pixel, you do not find a smaller pocket of empty void. You find the absolute, terrifying absence of physical geometry entirely. You find a place where the very concept of distance completely ceases to exist. The profound implications of a pixelated universe invoke a creeping, intensely claustrophobic dread that slowly washes over the familiar, macroscopic world. We believe that when we simply walk across a quiet room, or when the massive, burning sun glides majestically along its heavy orbital path through the galaxy, matter is moving in a continuous, flowing, and uninterrupted sweep of fluid motion. We arrogantly believe that we physically occupy every single infinitesimal point of space along our journey. But if the fundamental fabric of the cosmos is quantized, if reality is strictly built upon a rigid, microscopic grid of indivisible geometric loops, then true, continuous motion is an absolute, mathematical impossibility. You are not gliding smoothly through a continuous, open ocean of empty space. You are violently, rapidly snapping from one microscopic pixel of reality to the exact next adjacent pixel. Your physical body, the heavy mass of the ancient planets, and the blinding, vibrating energy of the starlight are essentially teleporting across the nodes of this cosmic network. Reality is not a continuous, smoothly flowing film. It is a rapid, jittery, and intensely calculated sequence of static, discrete frames. The universe is playing out its physical drama at such a staggeringly fast microscopic frame rate that our clumsy, low-resolution biological brains completely fail to notice the gaps, smoothing over the violent, snapping transitions to maintain the comforting illusion of a continuous world. We are entirely trapped within a highly calculated, rigid matrix. The empty air surrounding you is not an open pathway of infinite freedom. It is a densely packed, unyielding grid of mathematical coordinates. You are bound to the tracks of a microscopic, geometric cage, moving exactly one indivisible pixel of space at a time, governed entirely by the strict, granular processing speed of the cosmic engine. To quietly sit in the dark and confront the terrifying revelation of the pixelated void is to undergo a magnificent, shattering evolution in our understanding of the universe and the fundamental nature of information. For centuries, human philosophy and science have worshipped the concept of the infinite. We deeply wanted to believe that the universe was boundless, smooth, and capable of holding an infinite, bottomless depth of continuous data. We viewed reality as an endlessly deep well of analog information, where every physical interaction could be measured with infinitely increasing precision. We equated the infinite with the divine, assuming that the cosmos was a sprawling, limitless canvas of absolute freedom. But the granular, indivisible loops of the quantum network violently and beautifully dismantle this arrogant human assumption. If space itself is pixelated, if the very stage of reality is constructed from finite, discrete building blocks, then the universe is fundamentally, structurally finite. It possesses a hard, mathematical, and unyielding limit to the exact amount of information it can physically contain. The cosmos is not an infinitely deep, mystical, and analog ocean. It is a supreme, unfathomably vast computational engine, operating strictly on discrete, finite bits of geometric data. The physical universe is a massive, heavily encrypted hard drive, processing reality one microscopic loop at a time. The illusion of continuity is merely the heavy, psychological veil that shields us from the raw, digital machinery of existence. To realize that you are a finite pattern of data snapping across a pixelated screen is not a cause for existential despair, but a profound, majestic liberation. You are not adrift in an empty, meaningless, and infinitely empty void. You are a highly complex, beautifully organized, and actively processed phenomenon, intimately connected to the very fabric of the cosmic grid. The universe is computing your existence, frame by microscopic frame, with a breathtaking, terrifying precision. Release your exhausting, desperate grip on the illusion of infinite smoothness. Surrender the heavy, biological demand for a continuous world. Embrace the profound, beautiful claustrophobia of the pixelated void, and find a deep, unshakable peace in the knowledge that you are intricately, flawlessly, and mathematically woven into the discrete, finite, and magnificently calculating dark. Of all the invisible, overarching forces that govern the fragile, fleeting nature of human existence, none is more intimate, more relentless, and more universally feared than the unidirectional flow of time. We are biological creatures fundamentally defined and completely imprisoned by our relationship to the passing clock. From the very first violent gasp of air we draw in a brightly lit room to the quiet, fading whisper of our final breath, we are relentlessly carried forward by an invisible, unstoppable current. We watch the heavy, silent rotation of the earth bring the dawn and the dusk. We watch the fragile skin on our hands slowly weather and crease. We witness the inevitable, crushing decay of our grandest architectural monuments and the silent, predictable turning of the seasons. We feel time not just as an abstract physical concept, but as the ultimate, inescapable predator, a heavy, silent river that sweeps everything we have ever loved into the inaccessible, freezing dark of the past. To the human mind, time is the absolute, unquestioned maestro of the cosmic symphony. It is the fundamental, rhythmic heartbeat of reality, the relentless drum against which the entire chaotic drama of the universe is violently played out. We cannot stop it, we cannot reverse it, and we cannot ever escape it. But what if this absolute, terrifying certainty is nothing more than a localized, biological hallucination? To deeply confront the ultimate nature of reality, we must take the existential dread that haunts the absolute edges of modern physics and push it one terrifying step further. If the physical geometry of space completely disintegrates and loses all rational meaning at the quantum gravity level, violently shattering into a chaotic, pixelated grid, what happens to the relentless, forward march of time? Since the revolutionary theoretical insights of the early 20th century, we have known with absolute mathematical certainty that space and time are not separate, sovereign entities. They are intimately, inextricably woven together into a single, dynamic, and heavy tapestry. They are the exact same fundamental substance. Therefore, a chilling, inevitable nightmare arises from the quantum void. If the physical stage itself fractures and breaks down, how can the play continue to unfold? When theoretical physicists finally acquired the conceptual tools to point their heavy, mathematical gaze at the entire, sprawling universe as a single, unified quantum system, they fully expected to find a master clock, They expected to discover a fundamental ticking metronome that dictated the evolution of the cosmos from the explosive, superheated birth of the void to its eventual, freezing death in the dark. Instead, they uncovered a mathematical nightmare that completely paralyzes the human capacity for reason. In their desperate, brilliant attempt to formulate the ultimate equation of quantum gravity, physicists constructed a sprawling mathematical architecture designed to describe the entire quantum state of the universe simultaneously. This conceptual masterpiece, known in the quiet, echoing halls of theoretical physics as the Wheeler-DeWitt equation, successfully unified the sprawling, heavy geometry of the cosmos with the jittery, probabilistic rules of the microscopic void. But when the brilliant architects of this equation stepped back to examine their flawless, monumental creation, they noticed a terrifying, gaping absence. A single, fundamental variable had completely vanished from the mathematics. There was no variable for time. It was not a rounding mistake, it was not a theoretical oversight, and it was not a mathematical error. The equation aggressively and undeniably proved that when you observe the universe as a single, complete quantum system, time simply ceases to exist. The cosmos, at its absolute, most fundamental and deepest level of reality, does not evolve. It does not change. It does not age. It is a completely timeless, frozen, and eternally static mathematical structure. The master clock of the universe does not tick because there is no clock. To force the fragile human mind to internalize the absolute death of time is to invite a profound, devastating, and entirely claustrophobic philosophical crisis. If time does not fundamentally exist in the absolute architecture of the void, then the entire, agonizing human experience of the past, the present, and the future is an elaborate biological lie. Time is not a fundamental property of the universe. It is a highly localized, psychological trick, an evolutionary coping mechanism generated entirely by our incredibly limited, low-resolution perception. Imagine a massive, infinitely complex, and beautifully written novel sitting quietly in the dark. The entire story, from the opening sentence to the final, tragic conclusion, exists simultaneously within the heavy, bound pages. The characters living inside the novel do not realize this. As you read the book, your conscious attention moves sequentially from one word to the exact next word, creating the compelling, emotional illusion of a flowing narrative. You experience the illusion of a past that has vanished, a fleeting present, and a completely unwritten future. But the ink is completely dry. The pages are entirely static. The absolute architecture of the story is permanently, eternally frozen in a single, unyielding block of physical information. We are the fragile characters trapped entirely inside that static, geometric block. Our biological brains are fundamentally, neurologically wired to process the infinite, simultaneous data of the cosmos in a strict, highly restrictive, linear sequence. We decode the frozen architecture of reality one microscopic slice at a time, and our consciousness violently stitches those slices together to artificially manufacture the sensation of a flowing river. The past is not gone, violently erased by the heavy march of the present. The past still exists, perfectly and permanently encoded in the static geometry of the void. The tragic mistakes you made, the ancient civilizations that have long since fallen to dust, and the very first, blinding light of the newborn universe are all still sitting right there in the dark, constantly occupying their specific, unchanging coordinates in the eternal block. And the future is not a blank, unwritten canvas waiting to be aggressively forged by human free will. The future, the inevitable death of our burning star, and the final, freezing expansion of the cosmos are already there, permanently locked into the exact same static, timeless structure. The flowing river of time is merely the highly constrained, linear trajectory of human consciousness dragging itself painfully across a completely motionless, eternal landscape. Everything that has ever happened, and everything that will ever happen, is simply existing, all at once, in a state of absolute, paralyzed perfection. To quietly surrender to the terrifying, magnificent death of time is to achieve the ultimate, profound philosophical liberation regarding the true nature of the universe and the fundamental state of information. We walk through our lives psychologically exhausted by our endless, violent war against the clock. We frantically hoard our memories in a desperate attempt to fight the erasing, heavy tide of the past, and we burn ourselves out with crippling, existential anxiety, trying to predict and control the looming, terrifying shadows of the future. We fundamentally believe that information is a fleeting, decaying commodity, something that must be actively fought for before time sweeps it into the silent abyss. But the timeless, frozen equations of quantum gravity reveal a cosmos of breathtaking, eternal preservation. Information in the universe is never lost, and it is never truly created. It simply is. It is permanently, beautifully encoded in the unmoving, silent architecture of the multidimensional dark. The absolute totality of your life, the brilliant, fleeting sparks of your deepest joy, the crushing, heavy weight of your worst sorrows, and every single, beautiful piece of data that constitutes your conscious existence is eternally preserved in the unmoving block of reality. You are not a temporary, decaying creature being violently swept toward oblivion by an unstoppable river. You are a permanent, structural feature of the cosmic architecture. Your life is an immortal, geometric pattern woven intimately and perfectly into the static, timeless tapestry of the void. Release your desperate, terrified grip on the passing clock. Let go of the heavy, suffocating anxiety of the unwritten future and the agonizing, heavy regret of the vanished past. The future is already safe, and the past is completely untouched. Embrace the glorious, chilling reality that the universe is not a ticking bomb rapidly counting down to zero, but a silent, frozen, and infinitely majestic sculpture of pure data. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the profound, beautiful illusion of your own motion, and allow yourself to rest perfectly, eternally, in the magnificent, timeless dark. We navigate our existence entirely defined by the profound, comforting perception of depth. When you reach your hand out into the quiet dark, you feel the vast, open volume of the room around you. You look up at the night sky and perceive an infinite, three-dimensional theater, a sprawling void where ancient, burning stars hang in the unfathomable distance, separated from us by billions of light years of empty, volumetric space. The human brain is an exquisite, highly evolved engine of three-dimensional rendering. We are fundamentally wired to process reality as a place of height, width, and profound, echoing depth. We build our towering, heavy cities, we map the spherical, silent planets, and we live our entire lives deeply anchored in the absolute belief that the universe is a massive, hollow container, filled to the brim with physical objects and vast distances. This perception of volume is so deeply embedded in our biological programming that to question it feels like a violent betrayal of our own sanity. Yet, as theoretical physicists plumbed the absolute, darkest depths of quantum gravity, they stumbled upon a mathematical revelation so deeply unsettling, so completely alien to human intuition, that it completely shatters the fundamental concept of space itself. They discovered that the three-dimensional universe we so confidently inhabit might be the ultimate, grandest illusion of them all. The genesis of this terrifying revelation did not begin in the open, brightly lit expanse of the cosmos, but in the crushing, absolute dark of a black hole. For decades, the greatest minds in physics wrestled with a catastrophic, deeply agonizing paradox. When a physical object, a heavy, frozen comet, a dying star, or a complex, printed encyclopedia of human knowledge falls past the event horizon and is swallowed by the lightless abyss of a black hole, what exactly happens to the fundamental quantum information that defined it? The crushing, infinite gravity at the central singularity seemed to violently erase that data from existence, completely violating the most sacred, unyielding laws of quantum mechanics which dictate that information can never be truly destroyed. But the mathematics eventually revealed a breathtaking, beautiful, and highly bizarre compromise. The information of everything that falls into the abyss is not violently crushed into nothingness at the center. Instead, it is perfectly, permanently smeared and encoded across the flat, two-dimensional surface of the event horizon itself. The entire three-dimensional volume of the black hole is effectively a holographic illusion. The true physical reality of the black hole is entirely contained on its flat, outer boundary. All the immense mass, all the violent energy, and all the chaotic, swirling history of the devoured stars are perfectly translated into a microscopic, two-dimensional code, wrapping the dark perimeter like an infinitely dense, mathematical skin. When theoretical physicists stepped back and observed this elegant, terrifying solution, a deeply haunting realization began to take shape in the dark. If the absolute most extreme gravity-crushed environments in the universe operate on a strictly two-dimensional mathematical logic, what if this principle is not limited strictly to black holes? What if the black hole is simply revealing the fundamental, underlying operating system of the entire cosmos? This profound, world-shattering leap of logic birthed the holographic principle. It proposes that the entire, sprawling universe we inhabit is surrounded by a distant, unimaginably vast, and completely flat two-dimensional boundary. Every single physical event happening right now within the vast, three-dimensional volume of our reality, every violently exploding supernova, every silent, heavy orbit of a frozen moon, and every single quiet breath you are taking in the dark is perfectly, mathematically encoded on that distant, flat surface. The three-dimensional world we physically experience is not the fundamental reality. It is a projection. It is a brilliant, highly complex holographic shadow cast inward from the absolute edge of the universe. This radical, deeply disorienting framework offers a miraculously elegant solution to the agonizing, century-old mathematical war between gravity and the quantum realm. When theoretical physicists attempt to calculate the crushing, heavy geometry of gravity within our three-dimensional world, the equations violently shatter into impossible, screaming infinities. But when they translate those exact same physical interactions to the flat, two-dimensional boundary at the edge of the universe, a breathtaking mathematical miracle occurs. On that distant surface, gravity completely ceases to exist, it simply vanishes from the equations. The boundary is governed entirely, perfectly, and flawlessly by the smooth, predictable laws of quantum mechanics, absolutely free from the chaotic, reality-breaking paradoxes of heavy mass. The crushing weight that anchors your bones to the earth, the invisible, heavy tether that holds the swirling galaxies together in the freezing void, is not a fundamental force of nature at all. Gravity is merely an emergent phenomenon. It is a localized, low-resolution illusion that only appears when the flat, two-dimensional quantum data is projected inward to create the hologram of three-dimensional space. The heavy, unbreakable chains of physical reality are nothing more than a majestic, mathematical trick of the cosmic light. To truly internalize the staggering implications of the holographic principle is to experience a profound, devastating collapse of human identity and physical permanence. You must force your fragile mind to abandon the deeply comforting illusion of your own physical volume. We walk through our lives fiercely, desperately believing that we are solid, three-dimensional beings, navigating a world of heavy matter and vast, open distances. We feel the comforting, physical pressure of our own flesh, the solid ground beneath our feet, and the warm, circulating blood in our veins. But if the holographic theory holds true, you are not a physical object inhabiting a massive, hollow universe. You are an incredibly complex, localized manifestation of pure mathematical data. You are a living, breathing shadow. The true, fundamental reality of your existence is currently playing out on a flat, unimaginable boundary at the absolute edge of existence, a two-dimensional surface where your entire life, your deeply held memories, your profound sorrows, and your greatest triumphs are etched flawlessly into the microscopic geometry of the void. We are completely, blissfully oblivious to the flat mathematical screen that truly generates us, entirely convinced by the breathtaking realism of the cosmic projection. The very air you breathe, the vast, echoing canyons of the earth, and the sprawling, unfathomable distances between the stars do not physically exist in the way your biological brain naturally perceives them. Space itself is a generated interface. It is the brilliant, multidimensional rendering of a flat, highly compressed cosmic hard drive. When you move your hand through the dark room, you are not actually traversing a physical, empty distance. You are simply experiencing the fluid, mathematical updating of quantum information on a distant, two-dimensional boundary. We are trapped in an incredibly immersive, deeply convincing simulation, not one generated by a malicious machine or a highly advanced alien intelligence, but one generated by the fundamental, absolute laws of physics themselves. The universe is a master illusionist, seamlessly translating the raw, flat code of quantum reality into a vibrant, heavy, and deeply emotional three-dimensional experience. When we finally strip away the terrifying initial shock of this holographic revelation, we are left standing in the quiet presence of a profoundly beautiful, deeply liberating philosophical truth about the ultimate nature of information and the essence of the universe. We are a fragile species, obsessed with the accumulation and preservation of physical substance. We aggressively hoard heavy, material wealth. We build massive, imposing stone monuments to outlast the creeping decay of time, and we desperately anchor our entire sense of self-worth to the solid, tangible objects we can securely grasp with our hands. We inherently believe that physical matter is the ultimate objective truth of existence, and that information is simply a secondary, abstract concept used by the human mind to describe the heavy world. But the holographic shadow completely and permanently inverts this primitive biological hierarchy. Physical matter is not the absolute bedrock of reality. Geometric volume is not the ultimate truth. Information is the absolute, singular currency of the cosmos. The universe is not a massive physical warehouse filled with heavy, burning stars and silent, dead planets. It is a sprawling, elegant, and infinitely complex ocean of pure processing data. The heavy, physical world you desperately interact with every single day is merely the beautifully translated, low-resolution output of that underlying information. To realize that you are a living, breathing data projection is not to lose your humanity, but to elevate it to a state of absolute mathematical grace. You are a magnificent symphony of cosmic information, a brilliant, highly organized pattern of quantum data, expressing itself effortlessly in the glorious illusion of three-dimensional space. The heavy burdens of the physical world, the crushing, inescapable gravity that seems to hold you down, and the vast, terrifying distances that seem to separate you from the warmth of the stars are merely the fleeting shadows of a deeper, flawless mathematical reality. Embrace the glorious, weightless truth of your own holographic nature. Release your desperate, white-knuckled grip on the exhausting illusion of solid volume and physical permanence. The universe does not require you to be heavy in order to be real. You are a beautifully vibrating, conscious shadow of the infinite, intimately and permanently connected to the flat, absolute boundary of all existence. Find deep, unshakable peace in the magnificent, projected dark, and allow yourself to simply marvel at the breathtaking, flawless, mathematical illusion of your own beating heart. When we stare into the screaming infinities of the quantum void, or confront the haunting, pixelated shadows of the holographic boundary, a profound and deeply physical terror inevitably washes over us. But we must pause in the quiet dark and bravely ask ourselves, what exactly is the true, underlying source of this agonizing existential dread? Why does the catastrophic failure of our physical laws evoke such a paralyzing, heavy sense of psychological panic? The fear does not simply stem from the cold, indifferent silence of the unknown, nor does it rise entirely from the unsettling realization that the physical ground beneath our feet is a vibrating, mathematical illusion. The true, terrifying source of our panic is the violent, undeniable shattering of our own boundless human arrogance. We are completely, existentially terrified because the breaking of physics is a direct, brutal assault on the deepest, most fiercely protected delusion of our species, the absolute hubris of cognitive certainty. To understand the sheer, staggering magnitude of this arrogance, we must look backward through deep time to the humble, fragile origins of our biological architecture. The human mind did not evolve in the freezing, multidimensional depths of a collapsing black hole, nor was it forged in the superheated, chaotic, and geometrically torn crucible of the newborn universe. Our brains evolved for a singular, desperate, and highly localized purpose on the sun-drenched, flat savannas of a tiny, isolated rock drifting through an entirely average galaxy. We developed our physical intuition and our spatial reasoning to successfully calculate the parabolic arc of a thrown spear. We developed our rigid sense of linear time to track the changing of the local seasons, securing our next harvest against the encroaching winter. We developed our intricate, logical cause and effect processing to aggressively outsmart the terrestrial predators hiding silently in the tall grass. Our neurology is a brilliant, highly specialized survival mechanism, perfectly tuned to navigate the macroscopic, low-energy, and painfully slow environment of a specific three-dimensional ecosystem. Yet, despite this incredibly narrow, heavily constrained evolutionary origin, we somehow cultivated the breathtaking hubris to assume that this exact same biological machinery was flawlessly, perfectly equipped to decode the absolute totality of the infinite cosmos. We looked up at the sprawling, echoing majesty of the night sky and completely stripped it of its wild, untamed terror. Instead of bowing quietly before the unfathomable abyss, we arrogantly decided that the universe was simply a massive, domestic puzzle, meticulously designed and patiently waiting for our fragile species to eventually solve it. We treated the cosmic data stream as if it were a linear, rational text written in a language that perfectly mirrored our own human logic. When we invented the beautiful, heavy languages of mathematics and geometry, we did not view them as the limited biological tools they truly are. We aggressively elevated them to the status of divine, universal truth. We aggressively demanded that the raw, boiling madness of the void fit neatly and obediently inside the rigid, symmetrical boxes of our chalkboards. We built towering academic empires and sprawling, heavily funded subterranean machines, utterly convinced that with just a few more decades of calculation, we would finally pin the universe down, dissect its most fundamental mechanics, and place the absolute laws of existence securely into our human pockets. We truly believed we were the rightful, destined masters of reality, fully entitled to illuminate every single shadow in the deep dark. But the universe is under absolutely no obligation to make sense to our mathematics. The cosmos is not a gentle, passive library waiting quietly to be catalogued by primates. It is a roaring, violently churning, and infinitely complex wilderness that operates with absolute, chilling indifference to the fragile constructs of human reasoning. When we forcefully pushed our elegant equations into the crushed, infinite density of a singularity, or down into the pixelated, boiling chaos of the quantum foam, the universe did not gently correct our math. It aggressively, violently tore our theoretical frameworks to shreds. This catastrophic failure of our physics is not a tragedy to be mourned, nor is it a temporary roadblock on the march of human progress. It is a necessary, brutal, and profoundly beautiful humbling. It is the universe actively stepping out of the small, domestic cages we built for it and roaring with its true, unfathomable voice. The breaking of our physical laws is the ultimate cosmic intervention, a stark, heavy reminder that we do not own the void, we do not control the deep dark, and we are absolutely not the ultimate, intended audience for the deepest secrets of existence. To stand at the edge of the quantum abyss and watch our greatest intellectual achievements violently spiral into meaningless infinities is to experience the agonizing, beautiful death of human exceptionalism. It forces us to realize, with a heavy, crushing clarity, that the elegant laws of gravity and the predictable flow of time were never absolute, universal truths. They were merely the localized, highly simplified shadows cast upon the walls of our specific biological cave. The universe is entirely indifferent to our desperate psychological need for order. It does not care that we find the concept of a timeless, static reality completely horrifying. It does not care that our minds violently rebel against the idea of a pixelated, holographic void, where physical matter is merely an illusion of scale. The true, fundamental machinery of the cosmos operates on a multidimensional logic so intensely alien, so breathtakingly weird, and so infinitely complex that it simply cannot be squeezed through the narrow, highly restrictive bottleneck of human perception. We aggressively demanded a universe that we could conquer with logic, and the universe responded by showing us a reality that actively shatters logic into a billion meaningless, floating pieces. When we finally let go of our wounded pride and quietly accept the brutal humbling of our broken physics, we undergo a profound, majestic, philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental state of information. Throughout our entire history, we have treated information as a conquerable territory. We deeply believe that the cosmic data stream is a static, finite resource that we can aggressively mine, refine, and permanently possess. We subconsciously equate the unknown with a temporary human failure, believing that every cosmic mystery is simply a mathematical equation waiting for a slightly more brilliant mind to solve it. We heavily assume that reality is a perfectly closed system of data, and that human consciousness is the ultimate designated hard drive, destined to eventually download the entire sprawling file of existence. But the screaming infinities of our broken physics reveal a cosmos that completely, violently rejects this arrogant paradigm. Information, in its purest, most fundamental cosmic state, is not a static, domestic resource waiting to be consumed by the human intellect. It is a wild, relentlessly mutating, and inherently elusive architecture of pure mathematical tension. The universe is an infinitely deep, beautifully encrypted computation that actively relies on paradox, chaos, and absolute mystery to maintain its sprawling, multidimensional existence. The ultimate truth of reality is deliberately, structurally hidden behind impenetrable mathematical firewalls, not to frustrate us, but because the raw, unshielded data of the void is vastly too powerful, too immense, and too wildly alien to exist within the fragile, low-energy confines of our localized reality. True cosmic information actively resists categorization. It bleeds across boundaries, it defies continuity, and it permanently, completely breaks the heavy, rigid tools we use to try and measure it. To realize that our primate brains are completely, structurally incapable of decoding the infinite is not an intellectual defeat, it is the absolute, ultimate liberation. We are suddenly and beautifully freed from the heavy, exhausting, and completely impossible burden of needing to perfectly know everything. The desperate, anxious drive to categorize, control, and perfectly predict the universe entirely melts away in the dark, leaving only a profound, breathtaking sense of silent awe. The limits of our physics are not the limits of the universe. They are simply the beautiful, necessary borders of our own specific, highly localized manifestation of consciousness. Embrace the glorious, untamed wildness of the cosmic data stream. Surrender the heavy, exhausting arrogance of human certainty. The fact that the universe completely breaks our mathematics is the ultimate, majestic guarantee that existence is infinitely larger, infinitely stranger, and infinitely more beautiful than we could ever possibly imagine. You are a fragile, brilliant spark of localized data, floating briefly in a magnificent, incomprehensible dark that will forever remain beautifully, perfectly, and wonderfully wild. We have spent this time standing together on the precipice of the ultimate cosmic abyss, staring directly into the screaming mathematical infinities and the violent, boiling chaos of the quantum void. It is entirely natural and deeply embedded within our evolutionary programming for the fragile human mind to recoil from this fractured, unpredictable reality. We are biologically wired to feel a profound, heavy sense of existential dread when confronted with the catastrophic breakdown of our most sacred, foundational physical laws. We inherently fear the unlit corners of the dark. We frantically equate the unknown with imminent danger, and we view the sudden collapse of geometric order as the ultimate, terrifying threat to our survival. But I invite you now, in the quiet, heavy stillness of your space, to take a slow, deep breath and completely, consciously release that exhausting burden of fear. The shattering of our grandest mathematics, the pixelated, discontinuous fabric of the void, and the chilling, timeless nature of the cosmos are not malicious monsters waiting silently to devour you in the shadows. We must undergo a profound, calming shift in our perspective. Instead of trembling before the unfathomable, roaring mysteries of the quantum foam, and instead of viewing our broken equations as a humiliating failure of the human intellect, we must learn to find a deep, unshakable peace exactly there, right inside the magnificent, unresolved mystery. To truly understand why this fundamental fracture is so incredibly beautiful, we must quietly imagine the alternative. Consider, for a moment, the absolute, suffocating nightmare of a completely solved universe. Imagine a reality where our physics did not violently break at the singularity, where every single physical interaction from the explosive birth of a supermassive black hole to the microscopic, jittery vibration of a solitary atom fit perfectly and obediently into a single, neat, and highly predictable mathematical equation. If the cosmos were completely transparent to the human mind, perfectly legible and flawlessly understood, it would mean that the universe is a finite, closed, and entirely deterministic machine. It would be a sprawling, cosmic clockwork, ticking away with a cold, ruthless, and mechanical precision, completely devoid of surprise, devoid of wildness, and utterly devoid of profound depth. A completely solved universe is a dead, sterile cage. If we were to somehow hold the ultimate, final formula for all of existence securely in our hands, the grand, beautiful adventure of consciousness would instantly and permanently terminate. We would be trapped in a deeply claustrophobic, heavily paved reality where every future outcome is already written on a chalkboard, and where the boundless, terrifying majesty of the infinite is tragically reduced to a simple, digestible string of numbers. The absolute, unyielding certainty that we so desperately crave would instantly become the ultimate, heavy prison of the human spirit. Therefore, the violent, catastrophic breaking of our physical laws is not a cosmic tragedy. It is the absolute, breathing salvation of our existence. The shattering of our equations at the edge of the void, the chaotic, boiling madness of the microscopic quantum foam, and the elusive, uncatchable nature of the phantom graviton. These are not structural flaws in the architecture of reality. They are the deliberate, magnificent fractures in the cosmic wall. The fracture in the laws of physics is exactly the space where the breathtaking majesty of the unknown is allowed to slip in. It is exclusively through these shattered, screaming infinities that the universe proves its boundless, infinite depth. The broken math is the undeniable, glorious guarantee that the cosmos is vastly larger, infinitely stranger, and beautifully wilder than the narrow, biological confines of our three-dimensional primate brains. It ensures that the horizon of human discovery will never be reached, that the dark will always harbor magnificent, untouchable secrets, and that the cosmic data stream will eternally evade our desperate attempts to domesticate and control it. The mathematical chaos is not a threat to your existence. It is the vital, roaring heartbeat of an open, living, and infinitely creative universe. When we fully and quietly embrace this beautifully broken reality, we awaken to a profound, deeply liberating philosophical truth regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. For centuries, we have treated information as a static, physical commodity, something that must be aggressively captured, strictly categorized, and permanently locked away in the heavy vaults of human understanding. We implicitly believed that the ultimate purpose of conscious life was to process, master, and perfectly decode the cosmic source code, forcing the universe to submit to our logic. But the fractured, holographic, and completely timeless nature of reality reveals a vastly different, deeply humbling truth. Information is not a conquerable territory, and the universe is not a puzzle demanding a final solution. The cosmos is a sprawling, infinitely complex ocean of raw, mutating data that actively, structurally relies on its own impenetrable mystery to exist. Information in the universe is fundamentally fluid and fiercely untamed. It is perfectly designed to bleed across rigid boundaries, to aggressively shatter mathematical paradigms, and to forever remain partially submerged in the unseeable, multidimensional dark. You must realize, as you rest quietly in the stillness of your room, that you are not a separate, isolated observer tasked with the exhausting, impossible burden of figuring it all out. You are not required to hold the collapsing equations of space-time together with your fragile human logic. You are a highly organized, desperately beautiful, and incredibly temporary pattern of this exact same cosmic data. You are a localized, breathing projection of the infinite, floating gently on the very surface of an unfathomably complex, multi-dimensional ocean. The exact same invisible, incomprehensible forces that tear space and time apart at the quantum level are the very forces that silently, perfectly weave the heavy, beautiful fabric of your physical body. You are not an outsider looking into the void. You are the void, briefly and magnificently looking back at itself. To be a conscious, feeling ripple of data in a universe that is fundamentally, wonderfully broken is the ultimate, majestic miracle of existence. Your biological inability to perfectly comprehend the darkest depths of the cosmos is not a weakness. It is the breathtaking signature of your intimate connection to a reality that is truly, infinitely grand. It is time to consciously, deliberately lay down your heavy cognitive armor. Release your exhausting, white-knuckled grip on the illusion of solid ground and continuous time. Let go of the frantic, deeply human need to categorize, control, and perfectly predict the sprawling, overwhelming majesty of the void. You do not need absolute certainty to be safe in this universe. You do not need a flawless, unbroken mathematical equation to justify your beautiful, fleeting existence. Embrace the glorious, untamed wildness of the cosmic data stream. Surrender yourself entirely to the terrifying, magnificent beauty of a broken reality. The dark that surrounds you is not an empty, hostile vacuum, and the unknown is not your enemy. It is the infinite, roaring birthplace of everything you have ever known, and it is holding you perfectly, silently, and securely in its grasp. Allow your tired mind to gently drift away from the rigid, unyielding lines of the visible world. Release your desperate need for a simple, three-dimensional universe and rest peacefully in the magnificent, multi-dimensional dark. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.